Well, let me tell you a story. A story that, for me, totally changed the way I look at people, especially the quiet ones, the ones who just blend into the background. Because sometimes those are the people holding the whole world up, and we don't even notice. This happened maybe a couple of years ago, right outside Riverwood Memorial Park, which, if you don't know it, is basically the Arlington of our state. We're talking massive, stately old oak trees and these manicured emerald lawns where only the absolute best, the titans, get laid to rest. And this particular morning was for General Marcus Thorne, a four-star legend, advised presidents, basically a god in dress blues. It was private, highly restricted, total lockdown. So I'm working security, right? And the whole thing is already tense. Black SUVs are lining up, senators are showing up, everyone is in their absolute finest, whispering about defense budgets and legacy, when this old guy shows up at the main gate. He must have been about 80-something, maybe closer to 90, frail, kind of hunched over, wearing this ancient, faded navy blue suit that was maybe sharp back in '78, but now it just looked threadbare. He walks right up to the gate, and my buddy, Corporal Reed, who's maybe 20 and thinks his mirrored sunglasses make him intimidating, steps out. "Sir, this is a restricted event," Reed snaps, arms crossed, the whole 9 yards. "I need to see your invitation or your ID. This is invitation only for the Thorne family and official state guests." The old man, his name was Silas Stone, we learned later, didn't flinch. He didn't get angry or confused like most people who wander into the wrong place. He just stood there, looking past Reed and the gate, straight at the solemn flags flapping at half-mast, and he says in this quiet voice that just cut through all the noise, "I'm here for Mac. He'd want me here." Mac. General Marcus Thorne called him Mac? You could just feel the collective eye roll from the security detail. Reed actually let out this little dry, humorless cough like he was trying to choke back a laugh. "With all due respect, Mac," Reed stresses the name with pure sarcasm, "was a four-star general, sir. I'm sure he had a long list of friends, but without the appropriate clearance, I gotta ask you to move along." The motorcade was due any minute, and Silas was becoming a problem, a little knot of embarrassment right at the grand entrance. My lieutenant, Ethan Vance, this guy fresh out of officer candidate school, strutted over. Vance, I swear, thought his shiny boots gave him superpowers. He saw an old man in a cheap suit, and all he saw was an easy win, a chance to project authority. "Sir, you are disrupting a state funeral," Vance said, his voice clipped and rehearsed. "I'm giving you a final order to vacate the premises immediately. Otherwise, you're interfering with a military ceremony and you will be detained." Silas didn't move. He just looked at Vance, and for a second, it was like his eyes weren't even seeing the lieutenant. They were looking right through him into some kind of distance. Then he says something that just set Vance off. "Tell them," he says, still quiet, almost a whisper, "just tell them that Silas Stone is here. They'll know." Vance laughed. A loud, condescending laugh. "Silas Stone. Right, and I'm the chief of staff. Buddy, names mean zero without the paperwork. You got no ribbons, no medals, nothing on that suit to show service. You're a trespasser." It was a low blow, and Silas, for the first time, shifted. His hand suddenly drifted to his lapel, where this tiny, dull, blackish piece of metal was crookedly pinned to the worn fabric. It wasn't shiny, it wasn't official, it looked like a piece of chewed-up tinfoil. Vance, feeling smug, reached out and actually flicked the pin with his finger. "What is this supposed to be? Your special prize?" And that moment, the second Vance's glove touched that piece of metal, something broke. Silas's eyes narrowed, and a sudden, cold fury, the kind that makes the air crackle, flared up. "Don't touch that,"
Silas growled, and the voice was different. It was deep, dangerous, carrying the weight of actual thunder. Vance, determined not to back down, signaled Reed and the other guard. Detain him. If he resists, cuff him. As they grabbed Silas's thin arms, the small crowd of high-ranking guests watching from their cars started to gasp, a mixture of shock and pity. It was a humiliating scene, an old veteran, or just a delusional old man, being dragged away. But one person saw it differently. Captain Lena Morris, a sharp intelligence officer standing nearby, had been watching the whole time. She hadn't seen a confused civilian. She'd seen the way Silas stood, the stillness in his eyes, the kind of stillness only people who've been truly scared and truly in command of that fear ever have. And when she saw the rough way they handled him, she knew this was wrong, profoundly wrong. She couldn't engage directly, insubordination, career suicide, but she had a direct line to Colonel Davis, who was in the command tent. She ducked behind a black sedan, thumb flying across her phone screen. "Sir, it's Captain Morris, at the main gate. Security is detaining an elderly civilian. Name is Silas Stone. He claims he knew the general, no credentials, but sir, he's wearing this pin, small, misshapen. It looks like a piece of shrapnel." And on the other end, Colonel Davis, a man who'd served under Thorne for 8 years and never raised his voice, went silent. Dead silent. The radio chatter, the shuffling papers in the tent, all of it just vanished. Then Davis's voice came back, stripped bare of all rank, just pure, naked urgency. "Morris, repeat the name. And the pin, slowly." "Silas Stone, sir. The pin looks like shrapnel." The line went dead. Inside the tent, Davis slammed the phone onto the table so hard the water jumped out of his coffee cup. "Get General Williamson on the radio now. Get him off the viewing stand. I don't care. Now." Davis was pacing like a caged tiger. Silas Stone. General Thorne had spent the last 8 years of his life trying to find that man, to thank him one last time. Thorne had left explicit instructions in his desk, a final sealed letter Davis knew by heart. If Silas Stone ever comes looking, give him whatever he asks. He is owed a debt this nation can never repay. Davis snatched the radio. "General, this is Davis. We have a code Shepherd at the main gate. I repeat, code Shepherd is active." The radio crackled. General Williamson, a 4-star with 2 tours in the Gulf and the highest-ranking officer there, replied, his voice booming but steady. "Say again, Davis, Shepherd. That's not possible." "It's him, sir. The pin, the name, it matches. Silas Stone, and security is arresting him right now." The response was immediate. It was glacial. It was terrifying. "Halt everything. Halt the procession. I'm on my way." Back at the gate, Lieutenant Vance was basking in his victory. He had restored order. He was standing tall. He walked over to Silas, who was slumped between the 2 guards, his defeat apparent. Vance leaned in for the final, crushing blow to the old man's dignity. "Last chance, old man," he sneered, his breath hot with entitlement. "Walk away now, or you'll spend the rest of General Thorne's funeral in a holding cell. We'll tag you for public embarrassment and recommend a full psychiatric evaluation. A man of your age with these delusions."
And right then, as Vance delivered his final, unforgivable act of arrogance, it started. A low, powerful rumble felt in the chest first, then heard with the ears. Over the hill, not with the slow, dignified pace of the funeral, but with the terrifying, rapid purpose of a military response, 3 black Suburbans crested the rise. They screeched to a halt just feet from the gate, spitting gravel. Doors flew open with absolute military precision. Out stepped not MPs, but a cluster of colonels and sergeants major, men whose chests were heavy with so many ribbons they softly clinked with every movement. Colonel Gavies was the first one out, his face a mask of cold, controlled fury. Then, the rear door of the lead Suburban opened, and out stepped General Williamson, all 4 silver stars gleaming on his shoulders, his presence sucking all the air out of the morning.
Vance and his guards froze, their hands dropping from Silas Stone as if he were suddenly radioactive. They snapped to attention. General Williamson didn't spare the lieutenant a single glance. His storm cloud eyes scanned the scene until they landed on the stooped figure of Silas Stone. And the general's entire aura shifted. The hard command disappeared, replaced by something profound, almost reverent. He began to walk, slow, deliberate, his polished boots clicking on the pavement. He walked past the terrified Vance, past the stunned onlookers, his path leading to one man only. He stopped precisely 3 feet in front of Silas Stone. In the dead silence, General Williamson drew himself up to his full, commanding height. He raised his right hand to his brow, not in a gesture, but in the sharpest, most impeccably executed salute that side of the Pentagon. It was the ultimate salute, from a 4-star general to a civilian in a threadbare suit. His voice, a clear baritone that had addressed armies, boomed across the silent grounds for everyone to hear. "Mr. Stone, it is an honor, sir." Vance stammered, utterly bewildered. "General, sir, I apologize for the disturbance. This man was causing a scene. He had no authorization to be here." General Williamson's head snapped toward the lieutenant, his salute still fixed. His glare felt like a physical hammer blow. "He has more authorization to be on this ground than you or I will ever have, Lieutenant." Then, addressing the entire, now silent crowd, the general kept his hand fixed and began to speak, his voice carrying the weight of history. "You see an old man," he declared. "You see a civilian. But I see a giant. This is Silas Stone. To the history books, that name is nothing. But to the men of the old guard recon, and to the man we laid to rest today, General Marcus Thorne, he was a legend known by another name, the Shepherd." A collective gasp went through the crowd. "This man," the general continued, his voice rising, "went into places that don't exist on any map to rescue men the government had written off as lost. He was a medic, a navigator, and a warrior of unmatched ferocity. He never wore a rank. He refused every medal offered to him. He said the only reward he needed was seeing his boys come home." The general lowered his salute, his eyes shining with emotion, and pointed gently to the tarnished pin on Silas's lapel. "You see this piece of metal?" he growled, directing the sound at Vance. "This trinket you mistook for garbage? This is a piece of shrapnel from a grenade that landed 3 feet from Captain Thorne in '89. Silas Stone threw himself on top of Thorne, taking the blast that would have killed him instantly. Marcus Thorne forged that piece of shrapnel into a pin himself, and he called it the Medal of Shepherds. It is the only one ever made. It is the highest honor a man like him could ever bestow." The vindication was total, absolute. Soldiers in the crowd, from privates to colonels, slowly, one by one, began to raise their own hands in salute to the unassuming old man. Vance and his guards had drained of all color, realizing they hadn't made a mistake. They had committed sacrilege. General Williamson turned his full lethal attention to the 3 young men. "You asked him for his invitation? Let me be clear. Every single headstone on that hill is his invitation. You demanded to see his medals? Lieutenant, the scars on this man's body are a testament to a brand of courage your rulebook could never quantify. You stood in the presence of a living history and saw nothing but a nuisance. You will report to Colonel Davies. You will give him your names and your units, and you will be in my office at the Pentagon at 0600 tomorrow for a conversation about the true meaning of respect." As the general turned away, Silas Stone, who had been silent through the whole ordeal, reached out and placed a gentle, weathered hand on the general's uniformed arm. "Bill," Silas said softly, using Williamson's first name. "They were just kids doing their job the only way they knew it. Let it be." The general looked down, his expression softening, and gave a slow nod. Then Silas Stone turned and looked directly at Lieutenant Vance. There was no anger, but a deep, profound wisdom. "Son," Silas said, his voice quiet and kind, "that uniform you wear, it doesn't automatically grant you respect. It's a symbol, a promise. Respect is something you earn every single day by how you treat people. And you need to understand that sometimes the most important people, the ones who have sacrificed the most, wear no uniform at all. Just remember that. General Williamson personally escorted Silas Stone through the gates, past the rows of saluting soldiers and the stunned, silent crowd. He led him not to a back seat, but to the very front row, placing him among General Thorne's grieving family, who had heard the stories of the shepherd their whole lives. They embraced the old man with tears in their eyes. The fallout was swift. The lieutenant and his guards were not discharged. Silas wouldn't have wanted that. Instead, General Williamson personally oversaw their reassignment and mandatory retraining. He created a new course for all security personnel at sensitive military installations. It was a course in situational awareness, history, and empathy, designed to teach soldiers to look beyond the surface, to see the person, not just the uniform or lack thereof. The course became known throughout the armed forces as the Shepherd Protocol. Months passed. The young Lieutenant Vance, now humbled and reassigned to a quiet backwater checkpoint, was taking his lunch break at a small Greasy Spoon diner just off base. It was raining. He was staring into his coffee, lost in thought, when the bell above the door jingled. An old man walked in, shaking the rain from his shoulders, and took a seat at the counter. It was Silas Stone. Vance's heart's hammer in his chest. He watched as Silas ordered a coffee and sat staring out the window. For a long moment, Vance was frozen, a war of shame and gratitude raging within him. Finally, he stood up. He walked over to the counter, took a $10 bill from his wallet, and placed it down next to Silas's coffee cup. Silas looked up, his calm eyes showing a flicker of recognition. Vance couldn't bring himself to say much. His voice was thick with emotion. "For the coffee, sir." He paused, meeting the old man's gaze. "And for the lesson. Thank you." Silas Stone looked at the young man, truly looked at him, saw the change, the humility that had replaced the arrogance. He offered a small, knowing smile and a slight nod. "Stay safe, son," he said, his voice a quiet benediction. Vance nodded back, turned, and walked out of the diner, leaving the hero to his coffee, a silent and respectful understanding passing between them. And that's the story. It makes you think, doesn't it? Who is the real hero? The kid who wore the uniform and followed the rules, or the old man who earned his scars but asked for nothing? Have you ever met a shepherd in your own life? Someone who walked away from the glory but carried the real weight? Let me know in the comments below because I'm genuinely curious. Like this video if this story of quiet valor moved you, and subscribe to hear more stories of the people who matter most. Thanks for watching.